This is a great article by Alan McLeod. Always like his work. He used to be my colleague at Mint Press when I was there for a year. So just recently, legendary rapper and activist Chuck D, you know Chuck D from Public Enemy. Just recently, he appeared at the White House, apparently, earlier this summer, announcing he was joining forces with YouTube and with Antony Blinken's State Department to become one of Washington's, quote, global music ambassadors, unquote. A role directly modeled on Washington's Cold War-era efforts to use the arts to inspire U.S.-backed regime change in Eastern Europe and to use musical tours as covers that the CIA could use to assassinate foreign leaders. That's what they did back during the Cold War, and now they're basically trying to do it again. And he was kind of known, and actually up till recently continued to be known, as someone who was fighting for revolution, as someone who was inspired by Malcolm X, inspired by Black Panthers, and this guy is a badass through the years, and here he is smiling at the White House next to our genocidal Secretary of State. It is an unbelievable reversal and capturing of the few rappers who truly stood for something revolutionary. Continue from Alan McLeod's article, among the crowd of artists that included, and I'll be honest, I have fallen out of pop music. I don't know half these names. I know like the first 2 or 3 or something. Included Herbie Hancock, Armani White, Breland, Dennis Graves, Grace Bowers, Jelly Roll, I've heard of him, Justin Tranter. I know, I'm pathetic. Kane Brown, Lainey Wilson, and Teddy Swims. The Public Enemy frontman, I do know Public Enemy, was center stage, standing directly on Blinken's right-hand side, and was the first artist in the room mentioned by the Secretary of the State, earning a round of applause from journalists and dignitaries. And he said, quote, "I would like to thank everybody in the State Department and also YouTube for having me being invited to be a U.S. Global Music Ambassador." The rapper and writer of such songs as Fight the Power and Rebel Without a Cause used both the aesthetics and message of the Black Panther Party in his performances. It was seen as Malcolm X with a microphone, which is an odd thing to say, because didn't Malcolm X have a microphone a lot of the time? I feel like he did. So it wasn't Malcolm X with a microphone? I'm just saying, look, I'm just asking questions. Can't get mad at me for asking questions. He lists the Panthers and Malcolm X as influences during his formative years. Quote, I was in the Black Panther lunch program, he told the Historically podcast. Thus, for an artist to go from unapologetically demanding Black power to now enthusiastically supporting state power is a bitter pill to swallow for millions of fans. Throughout the press conference announcing the project's inauguration, Blinken and YouTube's global music head. So I've never seen this name before, Lyor, and are we not supposed to call him Lyor Cohen? Okay, I'm calling him Liar. I don't care how he pronounces it. And, you know, he's the head of YouTube, so he probably is a liar. YouTube's global music head, Lyor Cohen, it's probably Lyor. Anyway, constantly mentioned the CIA's secret Cold War program to use music and the arts as weapons for regime change. So they're not running. The State Department and this program is not running from what they were during the Cold War. They're touting it. They're saying, look at all the good we did they fucking assassinated people. And the music was used as an in to get information for assassinations. Why would you sign up to be a part of this? How soulless do you have to become to sign up to be a part of this? Cohen explained that YouTube was teaming up with the State Department to help them, quote, leverage global events. Quote, we will utilize major international gatherings to inspire action, meaning inspiring coups. What kinds of actions the State Department is interested in fomenting was not stated at the event, but it's not difficult to figure out. The CIA became a principal driver of both high and low culture across the globe. This is back during the Cold War, operating through its front organization, the Congress for Cultural Freedom. The CIA funded and promoted artists, writers, musicians, and intellectuals who advanced U.S. government interests in dozens of countries worldwide. At the height of its influence, the CIA published highly influential magazines, built up a book publishing empire promoting anti-communist literature, raised money for the production of hit movies, like hit movies, not assassination movies. I mean, maybe those too, but popular movies. Started academic journals and sponsored conferences the world over. the message of freedom the U.S. projected was a total fabrication. This is the history of where this is what they're trying to recreate. This is what they did during the Cold War. They projected that the U.S. was free, Soviet Union not, but also they went after a lot of countries that were not just Soviet Union, not just Soviet bloc. The message of freedom the U.S. projected was a total fabrication. In reality, the black stars it sent around the world to promote the idea that the U.S. was the home of liberty and tolerance were not even allowed to enter many music halls in their home states back then, let alone play in them. Genuine leftists were being ruthlessly purged from the public life in the anti-communist, McCarthyist witch hunts. This is the freedom that they were selling around the world using celebrity musicians to do it. This included many of America's finest talents. Singer Paul Robeson and actor Charlie Chaplin had their lives destroyed. He means those are two he's listing as having their lives destroyed, not two that were working with the CIA. Had their lives destroyed for supporting socialism. The latter, meaning Charlie Chaplin, spending the last 25 years of his life unable to return to the U.S. under fear of arrest for his political views. Scientist Albert Einstein was mistrusted by authorities and blocked from influential positions because of his socialist organizing. But their treatment was nothing compared to how U.S. authorities attacked black leaders, as you guys well know, such as Malcolm X and the Black Panthers, groups that served as inspiration for Chuck D's career. In 1969, police carried out the murder of Black Panther leader Fred Hampton in Chicago, shooting him in the room, shooting his bedroom up with like 60 some bullets, I think it was. Maybe I'm low on that number. While he slept, they basically just hosed his bedroom down with bullets. While in 1985, Philadelphia police carried out an airstrike against Black Liberation Organization MOVE. This is known as the MOVE bombing. For those of you who haven't heard of that, you should look it up. Literally, Philadelphia got into helicopters, dropped bombs on a residential building because they didn't like the Black organization, the political organization inside that lived in that building. They destroyed an entire residential neighborhood block and killed 11 people. Some of them children, I believe. Perhaps even more notable, however, is how the CIA used these goodwill tours of Black artists as cover to get close to African leaders in order to carry out assassinations. A case in point is Louis Armstrong's 1960 tour of the Congo. The newly independent country had just elected Patrice Lumumba as president. Young and charismatic, Lumumba was a radical who believed that his nation's immense resources should be used to build a democratic, egalitarian society. That's never good. Never good. If you're in Africa and you want an egalitarian society where the benefits of your nation go to the people in that nation, you look for the laser pointer on your forehead. That for CIA Director Alan Dulles, who described him as Africa's Fidel Castro, signed his death warrant. The CIA attached itself to the Jazz Legends Tour, meaning Louis Armstrong, accompanying him around the country and gathering crucial information on Lumumba's whereabouts and security to carry out an assassination. Lumumba was killed a few months later. In 1962, the CIA passed information to the apartheid government in South Africa that led to the arrest and imprisonment of Nelson Mandela for 27 years. Chuck D is aware of the history of the CIA using this program to overthrow countries and assassinate foreign leaders, referencing it in his interview with the Historically podcast. Nevertheless, he insisted, quote, "I ain't got nothing to do with fucking government. Their language is blood, bombs, and bullets." And yet there he is, that was his quote, standing next to one of the most bloodthirsty leaders in America, Antony Blinken, and saying, "I'm endorsing you, I'm endorsing this." By standing there, you're endorsing it. You don't stand there smiling and go, "Hey, I'm part of your program." Now, I'm not saying meeting with him, you're endorsing him. There are people that have met with him that have very strong disagreements with Antony Blinken or other U.S. officials. So it's not, you could meet these people, you could interview these people and disagree with everything they do. You cannot stand next to them and be part of a program of U.S. influence around the world to further the U.S. empire and be and not be a part of it. Like, you're a part of it. He offered a unique justification for working with the power he claimed to be fighting. So here was his justification. Quote, "I was accused of being with the State Department of the United States. I am basically telling people, Get them symbols and them titles out of your fucking head. That shit is no longer applicable. There are really no such thing as fucking countries and nations. It is technology that has become that. My only thing and my only ulterior motive is hip-hop music, rap, art, culture. That's it. That's my religion and my nation at this point. I trust no governments. They're all the same. But that doesn't actually justify it. You basically just told people to stop asking about it. I mean, you could say saying they're all the same doesn't say they don't exist. I don't know. It's absolutely the bizarrest mental gymnastics to try and justify why he's doing this. Standing next to Chuck D at the White House was Lyor Cohen. A man, again, I'm calling him Liar, a man he has long described as his mentor. Cohen has long been one of the most powerful men in the rap business, but with his 2016 appointment as global head of music at YouTube, he became arguably the most important person in the music industry. Cohen was born in New York City to Israeli parents with deep ties to the Zionist paramilitary group, the Haganah. His father, Elisha, was a member of the infamous Harel Brigade during the 1948 Nakba. And most of you know what the Nakba was. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians displaced, thousands murdered just in cold blood, simply for living in a village that Israel now claimed was theirs. The Harel Brigade played a pivotal role in the killings of thousands of Palestinians and the expulsion of hundreds of thousands more. This included carrying out biological warfare against the indigenous population. After the 1948 war, he became an officer in the IDF. So that's Lyor Cohen's father. Chuck D began working with Cohen began working with Public Enemy in 1980s and immediately began attempting to clean up its image. Cohen successfully lobbied Chuck D to fire Professor Griff from Public Enemy after the latter made anti-Semitic comments. While at Warner Music, he reportedly obstructed the promotion and release of an album by Lupe Fiasco, an artist known for his radical politics and committed support for Palestinian liberation. More recently, in November of last year, and this speaks to my other former colleague, Low Key. So I worked at Mint Press for a year, made videos for them, had weekly meetings with them, deciding topics and things. And Low Key was right there at every meeting with me for a year. And he still works with Mint Press, as does Alan McLeod, which is where this article is. Anyway, I bring that up because in November of last year, at the height of interest in Israel's attack on Gaza, some have connected Lyor Cohen with YouTube's decision to remove the song, quote, "terrorist" by Mint Press's Low Key from the platform after almost 14 years and 5.5 million views. So it'd been up for 14 years, 5.5 million views, and it was taken down right after Israel's genocide began. The incident is a microcosm of how a once politically conscious, revolutionary, and entirely, sorry, I skipped a little more, and so that's why it's switching back to Chuck D. An entirely non-politically correct art form has been defanged and reshaped by corporate forces to make it more palatable to those at the top of society. Chuck D is far from the first old rap legend accused of selling out. Yeah, definitely not. Ice-T found fame by releasing tracks like Cop Killer, but eventually became a cop on Law & Order SVU for like 20 years. I mean, how long has he been on that show? Ice Cube, meanwhile, went from fuck the police and arrest the president to allying himself with Donald Trump. Also, Ice Cube, I believe, has as well played. He's definitely played military. I think he's also played a cop, Ice Cube has. So yeah, just a couple of 180s from some of these folks. But the difference between Chuck D, and the reason Chuck D is more upsetting than Ice Cube or Ice-T, is that Chuck D continued to be very political. Those guys abandoned their politics like within, a couple of years of putting out those songs. I haven't followed everything Chuck D's ever said, very little of it. So I don't know whether it's been a slow softening over the years. He spent years hosting a show on Air America, the kind of largely pro-Democrat radio network. I don't know whether there's been a softening of his politics over the years, and now all of a sudden he's standing next to the goddamn genocider-in-chief, Anthony Blinken, shaking hands with him and going, I'm one of these guys. I don't know whether it was a softening or whether this is still a shocking switch for those who have been following his work for years and years. The United States has never stopped using music and musicians to foment unrest and spark regime change. In 2021, it sponsored, promoted, and attempted a counter-revolution in Cuba led by hip-hop artists that had been funding and promoting, they had been funding and promoting for years. The U.S. government had. Blinken himself has personally used music to advance a political agenda. In May of this year, God, this is horrific. He played a cover of Neil Young's Rockin' in the Free World in front of a host of TV cameras in a Kiev bar, because apparently Blinken plays the guitar. The message he was trying to project was that America stands with Ukraine and for freedom against the authoritarian dictatorship in the Kremlin. What Blinken either forgot or did not care about is that Rockin' in the Free World by Neil Young is a satirical protest song mocking how politicians sing odes to freedom in the U.S. while its people go hungry and sleep on the streets. Go read the lyrics to Rockin' in the Free World, and you will quickly see that it's not about, the U.S. is awesome. We have a long history of that, by the way, in the U.S. of taking songs born in the USA. If you actually listen to those lyrics, about being sent overseas to kill, quote unquote, the yellow man for no reason. And you read the actual lyrics. Born in the USA is not about woohoo USA. So he concludes with, this is far from YouTube's only connection to the U.S. national security state. Oh, or maybe this isn't quite the conclusion. Its parent company, Google, is essentially a creation of the CIA. Both the CIA and the NSA bankrolled the PhD research of Google's founder, Sergey Brin, and senior CIA officials oversaw the evolution of Google during its pre-launch phase. As late as 2005, the CIA was still a major shareholder in Google. These shares resulted from Google's acquisition of Keyhole Inc., a CIA-backed surveillance firm whose software eventually became Google Earth, the civilian offshoot of spying software the U.S. government uses to surveil and target its friends and enemies. Since then, Google has become a major CIA contractor, securing a cloud services contract worth tens of billions of dollars. Perhaps most alarmingly, is Mint Press found a network of dozens of former CIA agents and officials now working in senior positions at Google and YouTube. Other Mint Press news investigations have found similar networks of ex-CIA agents working in top jobs at Facebook, TikTok, and other platforms. The U.S. national security state is also intimately involved in producing pop culture. The military has produced or co-produced thousands of TV shows and Hollywood movies, including franchises such as Iron Man, The Avengers, Jurassic Park, and Top Gun. Basically, every time you see a U.S. movie that has U.S. military uniforms and vehicles in it, which is a lot of movies, like you wouldn't think Jurassic Park does, but it does have some U.S. military vehicles in it, not the original Jurassic Park, but later Jurassic Park movies. And in order to get access to all of those things, the uniforms, the vehicles, all that stuff, you need full approval of the Pentagon. And the Pentagon can change things in these scripts, and often does. So the Pentagon is signing on to basically be a co-producer of these films when you see military personnel and vehicles in them. It is in this vein the state that we should see the State Department's recent announcement to partner with musicians. That they are doing this should be no surprise. It's to push U.S. propaganda. What is remarkable, however, is how a musician with such widespread respect as a radical anti-establishment figure would decide to join forces with the very institution he has railed against for decades. Blinken unironically celebrated Chuck D, introducing him as a legendary rapper from Flushing, Queens, who inspired us to fight the power. That's how Blinken introduced him. Does Blinken not realize that he is the very power Public Enemy was rapping about fighting? By choosing to team up with Blinken and join a project openly being pitched as a psyop aimed at regime change, Chuck D has lamentably gone from fighting the power to working for the power. And Chuck D claims that he's not getting paid for it. So if he's not getting paid for it, then you really have no explanation. I mean, if you were getting paid for it, it'd still be gross. You'd still be disgusted, but we'd go, he just went to the money. He's just running for the money. He's claiming he's not getting paid for it. So then what the fuck are you doing? Honestly. All right. Well, there's one of Alan McLeod's epic deep dives into not just Chuck D completely turning against everything you thought he stood for, but also the history of the U.S. using musicians, using pop culture to push forward propaganda in order to facilitate imperial aims that often end in genocide and the death of millions, such as the global war on terror that's killed 6 million people. It ends in assassinations, coups, putting dictators in power, etc. It's fun history.